It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. A handbrake turn from President Trump as he announces a 90-day pause on tariffs.
I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, you know? They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid, unlike these champions, because we have a big job to do. No other president would have done what I did.
But he's raising them again on China. A new 125% tariff comes in after China said it was retaliating with an 84% of its own. The news was music to investors' ears, sending Wall Street surging after days of falls that erased trillions of dollars. We'll have a special report from Eastern China and the biggest wholesale market in the world on how tariffs are already hitting hard. Donald Trump insists there can be fair deals for everyone. We'll have full reaction from the White House. And we'll be live to Westminster, where Downing Street says the government will continue to negotiate coolly and calmly. Also tonight, Buckingham Palace reveal King Charles and Queen Camilla had a private visit with the Pope at the Vatican. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. It was exactly a week ago that Donald Trump stood in the Rose Garden on what he called Liberation Day as he unveiled a raft of worldwide tariffs, prompting a week of turbulence on markets, fueling fears of a global trade war. But for days, the president remained defiant. That was until a few hours ago when he capitulated, announcing most nations will enjoy a 90-day freeze at 10%. But not China. It's now facing a massive 125% tariff, a tit-for-tat move after China refused to back down and announced this morning it was increasing tariffs on American goods to 84%. Tonight, Donald Trump insisted his change of heart was nothing to do with negative reactions on the stock exchange or the looming fears of a recession. But it was his plan all along and was a reward to countries which had not retaliated. He insisted a deal could still be struck with China, adding China wants to make a deal, they just don't know how to go about it. Well, the American markets were still trading when the news emerged, sending Wall Street soaring immediately. The S&P 500 closed up 9.5%. The tech-heavy Nasdaq did even better, ending the day up more than 12%, while the Dow Jones closed up more than 7.8%. Compare that with European and Asian markets, which had closed before President Trump's announcement. Here in London, the FTSE 100 was down almost 3%. Germany's DAX had similar losses, while in Tokyo, the Nikkei shed almost 4%. Our first report tonight comes from our US correspondent, David Blevins, in Washington, D.C.
Hello, everybody.
A photo op with motor racing champions.
These are nice cars.
And a handbrake turn from the president, turning back from the course he'd set on tariffs just 1 week ago.
I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, you know? They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid, unlike these champions, because we have a big job to do. No other president would have done what I did.
It had been another day of policy by Truth Social Post. Donald Trump announcing a 90-day stay of execution for those countries he said hadn't retaliated, but raising tariffs again for the one country he said had. Based on the lack of respect that China has shown to the world's markets, I am hereby raising the tariff charged to China by the United States of America to 125%, effective immediately. At some point, hopefully in the near future, China will realise that the days of ripping off the USA and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable. Moments later, clarity from his Treasury Secretary, who claimed this had been the plan all along.
You might even say that he goaded China into a bad position they responded. They have shown themselves to the world to be the bad actors. And we are willing to cooperate with our allies and with our trading partners who did not retaliate. It wasn't a hard message. Don't retaliate.
It was a relief to the markets, stocks surging to one of their biggest gains since World War II. His Democratic rivals less impressed.
They keep changing their minds about what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and the only victim is the American public, American consumer, the American citizen, the American business.
The chaos playing out on Capitol Hill. Trump's trade representative defending tariffs at the very moment the president was rowing back.
So did you know that this was under discussion, and why did you not include that as part of your opening remarks?
So typically what I don't do is divulge the contents of my discussions with
What are the
President
details of the pause?
Well, my understanding is that because so many countries have decided not to retaliate, we're going to have about 90 days.
No, excuse me? China increased their tariffs on the United States. Trump blinked.
There were questions but no answers from President Trump's own trade advisor.
Sir, you said that tariffs were non-negotiable. Why did you say that?
Sir, we got to get to work. I apologize.
Did you contribute to the chaos in the market, sir?
Just hours before this climb down, the president posted online, "Be cool, everything's going to work out well. The USA will be bigger and better than ever before. This is a great time to buy." Anyone who did buy stocks and shares right then made a lot of money today. The White House is selling this as a stroke of economic genius. To many, it's damage limitation. But the trade war between the world's two largest economies rages on. David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
Well, in a moment, we'll get the latest from our US correspondent, James Matthews, at the White House, and our international correspondent, Diana Magnay, in Brussels. But first to our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who's in Downing Street for us. And John, Chief, first of all, we've heard from Downing Street that they will continue to negotiate with a cool and calm head.
The message from Downing Street, a defiant one, is that this pause does show that cool and calm can pay off. Now, what it means for the UK, the announcement from President Trump, is that there's no immediate change for the UK. That's because the 25% on cars and the 10% on other imports still stand. So no great change. But here in Downing Street, they believe they have been vindicated by their approach against those critics who claim the Prime Minister's being weak by not retaliating in some way. In a statement, a Number 10 spokesperson said this: "A trade war is in nobody's interests. We don't want any tariffs at all. So for jobs and livelihoods across the UK, we will coolly and calmly continue to negotiate in Britain's interests." Now, in addition to that, Number 10 source has told Sky News that this pause on those countries that did not retaliate does show cool and calm can pay off. It's how the PM does business, the source said, and it's the right approach. That's Keir Starmer, has been urging it in all his calls this week and will continue to. But from the President's critics here in the UK, chiefly Sir Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, well, there's a claim that this is Donald Trump's Liz Truss moment, a reference to that chaotic and calamitous mini-budget a couple of years ago that brought about her demise. He's been forced into an embarrassing climb down, says Sir Ed Davey. Now we need to get him to go further and get on with his remaining and get rid of his remaining reckless tariffs. That means an economic coalition of the willing and uniting with our allies. Well, the PM would say he's been talking to allies constantly and trying to get a trade deal, obviously, with the United States, as well as mitigate the damage done by these tariffs. But calm and cool is paying off. That is the message from here in Number 10.
John, thank you. Let's speak to Diana Magni now, who's our international correspondent in Brussels. And Diana, we saw earlier the EU have already retaliated, announcing that there will be reciprocal tariffs. But now that Donald Trump has made this announcement of the 90-day pause, could we see them drawing back on that?
Potentially. We haven't seen much movement on it yet. The only comment, really, that we've seen from a top EU official is the incoming Chancellor in Germany, Friedrich Merz, who said that he thought that Trump's response was because of the determination of Europeans to bring tariffs down again to the 10% level. But remember, the tariffs that the EU imposed today were not on that 20% benchmark that was put by Donald Trump on the EU. It was in response to the tariffs that he levied in February on steel and aluminium and cars. So we shall have to see what the EU decides to do about that. Their position has always been, we will keep these tariffs on, but we want a negotiated settlement. So if you're happy to talk, then we're happy to talk. We can lift them in an instant. So I imagine we will get some movement, and they're not due to start until next Tuesday. But again, this is in response to earlier steel and aluminium tariffs that Donald Trump placed, and not the 20% across the board tariff that he wanted to put on the EU, which has now been reduced to 10%. We also know that Donald Trump wants the EU to pay and buy US LNG, US energy supplies. And interestingly, at the end of his extremely long press conference in the Oval Office just now, he was asked about troop numbers in Europe and whether he would be drawing them down. And he said, well, you know, that is a separate issue from trade, but maybe we could package it all up together. He said it would be nice to wrap it up in one package. It's nice and clean. Well, I'm not sure that EU officials will consider it nice and clean to package up US commitment to NATO and Europe's defence with trade and tariffs. We shall have to see if that's another flippant comment from Donald Trump or whether he means it. But certainly there is still a lot that is not very clear about what he means to do about the EU, given the fact that the EU did respond today with a 25% tariff of its own on a whole selection of US goods.
OK, Diana in Brussels, thank you. Well, we'll hear from James at the White House in a moment. But as we've heard, the market's reaction to President Trump's latest turn on tariffs was immediate and upwards. Our business and economics correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan, is here.
Well, we've been on quite the journey since Liberation Day, when Donald Trump announced sweeping tariffs on countries across the world. Stock markets plummeted, giving Donald Trump's tariff policy a clear vote of no confidence. And that dysfunction quickly spread from the stock markets to the bond markets. This is US government debt. It's the yield on 30-year Treasury bonds. You can see that is that as investors started dumping stocks, they were looking for safer places to put their money, and very few assets are as safe as US government debt. The price of bonds rose, the yields fell. So far, so normal. But in the last couple of days, something concerning has been happening. Investors, they've been dumping stocks, but they were also starting to dump bonds as well. And there are a few reasons for this, but among them, the sense that perhaps US assets aren't the safe havens that they used to be. And with government borrowing costs rising, that was disconcerting for an administration that has trillions of dollars worth of debt to refinance this year. There was a sense that the pressure was mounting on Donald Trump. May he capitulate, and he did, announcing that 90-day pause on retaliatory tariffs for most countries. And with that, well, as you can imagine, the markets responded. The S&P 500 up 9.5%, the Dow Jones up 7.5%, and the Nasdaq, as you can see here, leading the charge. It says 7.2% there, but it's up around 12.5% now. And it's those companies that suffered the most, like Apple and Tesla and Walmart, that were leading the charge. And we can expect that Asian and European markets will go higher too. So some relief in the financial markets, and a sense that the president is now willing at least to listen to some feedback. But this isn't over yet. Some of that damaged confidence will take time to rebuild, and we've already seen that bond yields aren't recovering to the extent that the president would like. He's a volatile character. There's still a huge amount of uncertainty, and we don't know what will happen when those 90 days are up.
Well, let's speak to our US correspondent now, James Matthews at the White House. And James, as we were hearing there, that 90-day pause certainly has put cheer into the markets.
That's right, yeah, but Gurpreet makes a very good point that, yeah, it's 90 days. What happens at the end of 90 days with this unpredictable president who seems to change his mind on a day-to-day basis? It's been an interesting day here at the White House, Gillian. A couple of hours earlier, Brooke Rollins, the Agriculture Secretary, went inside. She stopped at the microphone and said, look, the line holds. We're all about Main Street, not Wall Street. So there was no change in the position then. Then within half an hour, it turned on a Truth Social posting. Donald Trump talking about these new tariffs on China, the 90-day pause. And thereafter, we had Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, rolled out to justify the change in mood. I've just seen Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary. I said, how's it going? He says, too good. So they're clearly buoyant, but it obviously caught them by surprise. Donald Trump today talking about how he sensed that everybody was queasy, said everybody was yippy, said he had watched on TV a Fox Business interview with Jamie Dimon. He's the CEO of JP Morgan. And this is how the money men communicate with Donald Trump now. They know that he watches Fox Business. He went on Jamie Dimon and said it's likely there will be a US recession this year. Within a couple of hours, we had this Trump call. In that last news conference, he said that this is a decision, a Truth Social post that was written from the heart. I think that would have gripped the financial world by the throat in the United States amidst tumbling markets. Yeah, they've done well today, but since Trump took over as president, Wall Street has lost more than $10 trillion. JP Morgan is still saying there is up to a 50% chance of a US recession. So, you know, they are cheerful today here in the White House, but they leave behind them a trail of carnage. There is a 90-day pause. Trump has introduced a calm, I suppose, and he will be looking for allies in a trade war with China. I suspect that's part of the strategy, but, you know, it's still a mess. Yes, there are 90 days, but there is much work to be done. And you have to wonder about these 75 countries and more queuing up, says Donald Trump, to negotiate with him, trying to gauge the mind of the negotiator sitting across the table. That's no easy task.
James, thank you for the moment. Hope to be back to you a little later in the programme. Thank you. President Trump's move also appears to be an attempt to narrow what was growing into a global trade war, into a showdown between the US and China. Trump's tariff on Chinese imports now stands at 125%, what he raised it to while pausing levies for everyone else. Earlier, China raised its tariffs on American goods to 84%, which will kick in tomorrow. Our Asia correspondent Helen Ann Smith reports from a trade market in eastern China.
If you've ever bought something with a Made in China label, it could well have come through here. Yiwu is the biggest wholesale market in the world. A vast and varied trove of trinkets. Chinese goods made cheap and tailored to foreign buyers.
2 kwai. So that's about 20 pence. Yeah, 20 pence. 20 pence for this, almost certainly on its way to America.
It is a place where the world comes to shop. Mass orders to be shipped back home and sold. Many buyers had been from America. That business now all but obliterated in the face of one man's war on trade. In the sports section, we meet Lee, who specialises in basketballs. Tariffs have more than doubled the costs for his American customers. His orders already down over 60%.
It's impossible to recover to where we were in just a short period of time. It's having a huge impact, Look, there are many other sellers. Costs are high, like rent. The exchange rate is going up. It's a big test. It's very difficult.
Sentiment here is dismal. Feelings about Trump equally so. Chu Hai-ching might put on a cheerful show, but just listen to what she thinks could come next. A sense that the public wants to show how it feels. If it were me, I'd definitely choose to boycott American products, she says. Like cell phones. I'm using this now, but if it carries on like this, I might not buy it. I wouldn't choose it anymore. The official response when it came was decisive. The words resolute. We will not back down.
The US continues to impose excessive tariffs that exert extreme pressure on China. China firmly opposes and will never accept such domineering and bullying behaviour.
In the end, trade was China's main target. Levies matched like for like. A more political response was feared, one that would have seriously raised the stakes. A degree of restraint, perhaps, behind the rage.
There is a genuine belief at the top levels of the Chinese system that the US's ultimate goal here is to restrain China and undermine its growth. And in the context of that belief, giving in to Trump just isn't an option. But this moment marks a real low in US-China relations because over the years, despite all their disagreements, trade was always there as a backstop, keeping the two linked. If that's gone, there are big questions about what could come next.
From EWU's vantage point, the impact cannot be overstated. And the enormity of the world's two biggest economies essentially ceasing to trade has barely yet sunk in. Further escalation is still possible. This moment is still perilous. Helen Ann Smith, Sky News in EWU, Eastern China.
Now, ever since Donald Trump unveiled his tariffs last week, the Prime Minister's message has been to maintain a cool head and not to panic. Today, he and the Chancellor have been talking up what they say is a multi-billion-pound deal for Universal to bring a theme park to Bedfordshire. Universal is owned by Comcast, the parent company of Sky News. Rachel Reeves has also been meeting city bosses to address the market turbulence caused by President Trump's tariffs. Our political correspondent Serena Barker-Singh reports.
Here's the theme park. Yep.
A deal struck amid global tariff chaos.
So this is where the station will be.
A new investment for a Universal theme park in Bedford, built to be the biggest in Europe.
This will drive growth here and across the country. Higher tourism, improved transport links, and billions of investment, generating an estimated $35 billion over coming decades. That's a huge amount of money.
It's the second joint industry visit from the Prime Minister-Chancellor pair this week, amid what they call an era of global economic disruption, the market's still spiralling from Trump's tariffs. But fears now there may be a time limit to save British steel, slapped with US tariffs.
We are absolutely committed to supporting the steel industry in the UK, whether that is through high-speed rail, the new runway at Heathrow, and indeed this investment here at Universal.
But no commitment for this park?
We have secured agreements from Universal to use British steel where possible.
There will be some public money spent, though the government has not yet given an indication of how much, citing the details of the negotiation as confidential. But a personal guarantee today to the CEO of Universal Destinations and Experiences.
Any glitches, just come straight to my office. They don't go round the houses.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Fantastic.
Do you think you can use exclusively British steel for this kind of project?
Well, we hope to source all materials as locally as we possibly can. That's better for the economics of the project and better for the environment. The less you have to ship, the easier it is.
It's not much to look at now, but this is the site that Universal have chosen for their first theme park in Europe. It's had wide political support from most of the UK parties, but it's an ambitious task to open in 2031 and a boost to the economy of £50 billion not predicted until 2055. One growth think tank says the government are using a tool called a special development order to speed up the planning process to make 2031 a realistic timeline.
So we've had risks in the past where similar theme park projects have had support in terms of getting that permission and getting that endorsement from politicians, but they've not been able to proceed because of environmental reasons. Essentially, we're taking it out of the hands of local councillors and making a decision from the central government to say this project needs to go ahead.
People said to me, government will be a roller coaster, and I can testify to that.
Mayhem in the markets hasn't yet steered the government away from their fiscal rules, which means there may be even more difficult choices ahead. Serena Barker Singh, Sky News, Bedfordshire.
The King and Queen have met Pope Francis at the Vatican as he recovers from a bout of double pneumonia. Charles and Camilla made the unannounced private visit as their official four-day trip to Italy comes to an end. Today, the King became the first British monarch to address a joint session of Parliament, speaking at times in Italian. Our royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills reports from Rome.
His appearance on Sunday had made a meeting seem more likely. Now we know Pope Francis on Wednesday afternoon did meet the King and Queen. A statement from the palace saying their majesties were delighted that the Pope was well enough to host them and to have had the opportunity to share their best wishes in person. The Pope, we're told, also wishing the King a speedy recovery for his health and able to express his best wishes on what was already a special day. They've come a long way since they had to hide their relationship away. Guests of honour at a state banquet, the King certainly grateful to their hosts.
Today marks, as you say, the Queen's and my 20th wedding anniversary. On that score, I must say it really is very good of you, Mr. President, to lay on this small, romantic candlelit dinner too.
Earlier, he'd taken to his feet in front of both houses of the Italian Parliament. A first for a British monarch, delivering a powerful message from the United Kingdom.
Our younger generations can now see in the news every day on their smartphones and tablets that peace is never to be taken for granted. Permettetemi.
Speaking for over 22 minutes, partly in Italian and with a good chunk on his favourite subject, the environment, he was almost cut short.
La cerimonia è terminata. I gentili ospiti.
I've finished.
It's a joke.
It was a day about relationship building. The King starting his with a meeting with Giorgia Meloni, Italy's right-wing Prime Minister. No doubt there was much to discuss, especially when both have their own links with Donald Trump. From the first time we were told about this trip, the King's speech was being billed as a big deal. His first significant address since, for example, he offered Donald Trump that state visit and he met up with President Zelensky. Once again, his words and his meetings here in Italy have placed him right at the forefront of those intense and difficult diplomatic issues.
Keep moving, please, keep moving.
Left. But even in the chaos, always delivered with a lightness of touch. A final walkabout in Rome by one partnership used to weathering the highs and lows of a long-term union. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News in Rome.
The family of a mother murdered at the Notting Hill Carnival says organisers and police must address growing safety concerns. 32-year-old Cher Maximin was stabbed in front of her 3-year-old daughter while intervening in a fight during the Carnival's Family Day last August. 20-year-old Shakil Thibu was today convicted of her murder. Cher's foster sister spoke afterwards outside the Old Bailey.
We must address growing safety concerns and engage in solution-focused conversations about its evolution. This iconic event deserves protection and support by prioritising public safety through collaborative planning and innovative strategies. We can honour and safeguard the joy and inclusivity the Carnival represents.
Most of the 7 police officers injured in a huge crash near Newcastle have been released from hospital. The collision along the A1 early this morning involved 5 police vehicles and a car being pursued. A man and woman in their 20s were arrested, suspected of dangerous driving. The Court of Appeal has heard that Prince Harry's safety and life are at stake at the end of his appeal over his UK security. The Duke is challenging the Home Office's decision to remove his automatic right to police protection. The Home Office argues that Harry's unique circumstances, having stepped down from royal duties, require a bespoke security approach. A ruling is likely after Easter. Well, let's return now to our main story tonight, and that is the surprise news that Donald Trump has announced a 90-day pause on tariffs for most nations except China, which is facing a 125% tariff. Let's head back to the White House and our US correspondent, James Matthews. Well, James, despite the news this evening of that pause, the trade war with China continues and has escalated.
Yeah, Gillian, there will be discussion, because there always is around Donald Trump, about whether this was an act of genius or whether it was a reaction of a man who makes it up as he goes along and was bounced by events. The big event, of course, now is the looming trade war with China, a country, remember, that has vowed to fight to the end. How it ends for Donald Trump will come to define his presidency, possibly more than anything else. Critics are quieter for the moment, but remember, these tariffs are only on pause. Donald Trump's sureness of touch is still to be tested. And I wonder, what price, on a day that he sent the market soaring, what price trust in Donald Trump now as a strategist and as an ally? It's a story that matters to us all, a story with global trade, world markets at its heart. It matters to everybody that Donald Trump gets it right. That's why the whiplash management of world affairs that we have seen today is a matter of concern to us all.
James, thank you. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the former Conservative special advisor, Salma Shah. Amongst the stories, we'll be discussing this on the front of the Financial Times. Its headline, stocks soar as Trump presses tariffs pause button and hits China harder. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.